you believers, non-believers, unaffiliated believers, sort of believers, and even you think I'm a believers, welcome to the Uncensored Unprofessor. This is a podcast where we buck the agnostic trend and heartfully confess there is a God. A show where we pursue godly wisdom and seek after Christ. It's my heart's desire to help build up your faith. I just gotta. I want to talk about Joe Biden's Thursday, September 9th afternoon speech. I watched it live. It was 26 minutes of misdirected fury. Joe wants to protect the vaccinated from the unvaccinated. That passes for medicine under the Biden administration. Yep, new vaccine mandates will be rolled out to affect the lives, as he said, of over 100 million people. And me? I'm afraid we saw the real Joe. Fangs bared. Who's he angry with? The unvaccinated. Singularly, who's causing the virus to spread? The unvaccinated. He's not angry at China for the virus. Nope. Not angry about how millions have lost their jobs and are now on the government teat. Nope. He's not angry that air quotes, vaccines, as it turned out, do not in fact altogether prevent you from getting the virus. Nuh-uh. He's not sorry that finite people get infected with airborne diseases beyond the control of mankind. Nope. He's not even angry with Pfizer because people who have been injected are hospitalized or are dying from the virus. Nope. He is red-faced mad at the unvaccinated. Get this, he wants, with all his heart, to protect vaccinated workers from the unvaccinated. That passes for science in Joe's mind. Wow, did we see the real Joe? 'Cause I think that was an ugly Joe. And it was a sad day in American history on top of so many sad days in recent American history. Joe seems to have forgotten that he's an elected official. He's not King Joe. He's not Lord Joe. He's not Dear Leader Joe yet. He doesn't serve at his good pleasure. He serves at the pleasure of the American citizenry. It's called government by the people, not government brooding over the people. His imperious tone was, well, unashamed. Clearly he thinks he's above all of us. Clearly thinks we're all here to do his bidding. We're all here to obey King Joe? It was really ugly. It was telling. And it's one of the things I detest most about career politicians. They're consistently imperious, imperial, domineering, haughty, commonly speaking down to us. Too often they think they're greater than us. They think they're doing us all a favor. Condescending. And it was oh so condescending. Like, come here, children. I have something I need to explain to you. Now, sit there quietly, because without my help, you won't be able to understand any of it. Oh, it drives me crazy. And there was Joe Biden on TV scolding 80 million people, talking down at us. You're joshing my Joshua tree, right? He wants to protect the vaccinated from the unvaccinated? I know, right? Seriously. That's how you're going to convince people with medically sincere questions about vaccines that, as it turns out, are not precisely vaccines? The vaccinated need to be protected from the unvaccinated? Sorry, I don't think you moved the needle, Joe, and you certainly didn't convince me to get the needle. The injections are not, in fact, foolproof? Oh, and then there's that little thing called America. Yeah, American ideals, American precedent, American liberty, the most free country in the world. A country where for 247 years one was free to choose what would be done with one's own body? All of that be damned. Because Lord Joe commands we all get injected. After all, he's president now. Man, it was grievous to watch. So ugly. And I sat there on the couch watching, thinking, this is so weird. With his approval rating plunging, Joe goes on TV and imperiously scolds people? Not gonna work. Why'd he do it? I think he's so red-faced over the Afghanistan pullout chaos cluster that he wanted to give the media a redirect. And that's what career-long politicians do. Stir redirects. Change the news cycle. Oh, but it was only ugly. Not even a little bit inviting. Not about persuasion. Just plain ugly. Say it ain't so, Joe. So what will dear Leader Joe's policy lead to now? More division, more jobs lost, more businesses shut down, less airline travel, and worst of all, less freedom. You'll allow me to fly on a plane if I get the jab? Why, thank you, Democratic Party. Oh, gosh. We no longer have say-so over what happens to our very bodies? Frightening. But not for Joe. I'm afraid he likes chaos. The ends justify the means, because chaos equals more governmental power. Oh, I'm living in a twisted Salvador Dali painting, and the slotch just rolls on and on and on and on. Okay, let's mix in some strategery. How should you debate a postmodernist? It's a timely question. How should you debate a POMO? Society today, after 60-some years of public educational indoctrination that there is no objective truth, and or that all truth is socially constructed, society today is awash with postmodernists. No, most of them could not articulate postmodernism, but they are inebriated with the POMO mood. So, how should you debate one? How do you have a discussion over a hot cup of coffee with a POMO? First, you simply must understand the mood, the wiring of POMOs. I've recommended the following books on my UU webpage, and hey, on that page, I note my all-time favorite books, as well as the books I'm reading, as well as those I have on deck. And of course, there are so many good books on postmodernism today, but I want to give you a couple that'll help you understand what the stink is going on. Super easy to read, is Postmodernism for Beginners. I think I got it online for $9. It's formatted in a fun, winsome manner, kind of like those Idiot's Guides books. It has lots of pictures and diagrams and cartoons. Jim Powell's book, Postmodernism for Beginners, is an easy place to start in understanding the illogical mindset of the POMOs. And then B, Stephen Hicks, Explaining Postmodernism, Stoicism, and Socialism from Rousseau to Foucault. Now, this is an academic read, and it is the single best book I've ever read on postmodernism. It was $19 used. It's hardback only, and it's $19 used, $10 for Kindle at Amazon. And Dr. Hicks doesn't only chew through the muddled and self-contradictory philosophy at work in postmodernism, he dives deep into its motives. Briefly, what are those motives? To deconstruct anything it doesn't like, sometimes just for the fun of it. And then per always the motive? Power. POMOs love control. Whether through fear, intimidation, chaos, confusion, red herrings, chaos, promises of utopia, equality, fairness, chaos, or equity. POMOs love to move people and institutions into positions whereby the POMOs themselves, up or down, washed out gray or rainbow, they can grab the levers of power. And if you want to go still deeper comparing postmodernism with Christianity, email me at uncensoredunprofessor@gmail.com. So first, if you're going to have that conversation, you need to know what's at hand, how postmodernism is wired. Second, in conversing with a POMO, ask yourself, and this one comes from Dr. Hicks himself, ask yourself, is this person honest? And you'll be able to discern that if they're being evasive. So if they keep introducing new angles and topics and terms and memes and anecdotes, it's likely they want to keep the leverage. They want to maintain dominance over you. You'll know then that it's not an honest exchange. Remember this, you guys. Whomever controls the definitions controls the conversation. So if they're being evasive, they're not being honest with you. Because in their mind, the end, control and power, justifies the means, red herrings, chaos, memes. As I said before, postmodernism enjoys deconstructing things, often just for the fun of it. So when they keep trying to dance around and confuse you and use fuzzy terminology, it's probably a game for them, a chance to make you feel stupid amid their chaotic dance. A Seattle woman. It's been 2 years already. I'd never met her. She comes onto my Facebook page and begins calling me out. When I, out of kindness, respond with a thoughtful answer, she changes gears and accuses me of something else. When out of charity I respond with yet another thoughtful answer, she responds evasively, changes gears, and accuses me of yet something else. So clearly for her, the ends justify the means. And so me? I deleted her snotty posts, then I went and blocked her. She wasn't being honest. She didn't want to engage my agency. She wanted to shame me. And that's a waste of my time. So you need to discern your audience. You need to discern your conversation partner, and you need to see if they're being honest. And third, and this one also again comes from Dr. Hicks, ask yourself what matters most to this person. Again, this is a strategic question, I think, well posed by Stephen Hicks. Ask yourself, are they thinking ethically, historically, religiously, honestly? Because most of the time, again, because power and control is at the motivational root of postmodern deconstructionism, most of the time they'll be thinking politically, how to gain the upper hand over you, over families, economics, institutions. If you can discern what matters to them, you can work the conversation through that from a Christian perspective. But again, the key, focus. Be willing to drill down. Constantly ask your conversation partner to define his or her terms. Most of the time they won't be able to. But that will, hopefully, help them see the folly of their thinking. Ask yourself, what matters most to them? During my years as a prof, I'd have several students per week in my office. Almost always they'd start the conversation by asking me some doctrinal or historical question. Now, in those first few years, I'd answer with a doctrinal or historical answer, and that's because I love to dive deeper, love to explore, love to show how and why which commitments eventually win out, work. But I learned that most of the time that their first question was not really why they came into my office. Most often, they were processing some wound or doubt. Something had happened to them, family, friends, church, and they were working through the aftermath. So try to determine what matters most to them, and in doing that, you'll be taking their agency seriously. Now, probably with a POMO, they aren't even working through their pain with you. Probably they're jerking your chain to shame you. America is racist. Whites are evil. They want to pin you down. Their ends justify their means. Be willing to engage, but ask them, from where do you think medicine came? Or what kind of worldview do you think lifted billions of people out of poverty? Or do you believe God will judge every individual as an individual? You can ask, is it important that individuals be mature enough to tend to their own needs? Ask questions that make them reason. Ask questions that beg explanations. Ask them to describe and define their premises and foundations and the grounds of their thinking. This is not about feelings. Ask them, why do you think that's true? Questions like that go to reasoning, and they don't want to reason. Pomos want to emote. But the key is here, know your limits. Know when you're casting your pearls before swine. That is, when the conversation is a waste of time because the person is not taking you seriously as a responsible agent. Don't abide controllers for long. Hey, want to be subversive? Want to take action against the principalities and powers that, as the Apostle Paul put it in 2 Corinthians 4:4, blind the minds of those who don't believe? Donate to the UU Show. You can sign up for a monthly pledge of $5, $10, or $20, gold, frankincense, or myrrh. I didn't start the show to be a cultural pushback, a defense against epistemological distortion, but I sure have taken that focus over these last 18 months. Me? I'd love your support. Patreon, Patreon. Go there and join the subversive squad. Alrighty then, let's delve more into the Christian worldview, shan't we? Justice. Me? I love justice. I've taken the Myers-Briggs personality profile.
It's called Briggs and Stratton.
Listen, fella, you work on your lawnmower, I'll attend to my personality. And the Myers-Briggs profile has shown me each time to be an ENTJ. Now, I gotta tell you, my E, extroversion, is at about 60 to 65%. My N, intuition regarding the future, is at about 80%. My T, thinking, is at 70%, but my J, judgment, is at like 90% or plus or more. It's the strongest of my four components. And justice cannot happen without judgment. And just judgment cannot happen without truth. But in postmodernism, truth no longer exists, so neither judgment nor justice are remotely possible. But for me, injustices make my blood boil. The powerful smoking the weak, there goes my temper. Entire racial groups being demonized, ooh, that gets me hot. So yeah, I care about justice, and maybe that's why my blood pressure runs just a little bit high, I'm not sure. But from beginning to end, the Bible presents a God who cares about justice. I mean, goodness, just having said that little bit, we can intuit why it is that so many 21st century American Christians care about justice. And Christians should care about justice. It's the heart of God to seek justice. But because we care about definitions, we know that social justice is not the same as Christian justice. And I clarify at length the distinctions between those two, biblical and social justice, in episode 169. And the gist of that podcast? Social justice, like all POMO categories, is an undefined or ill-defined and elusive phrase. The definitional target keeps moving. It's ever moving from equality to fairness to diversity to equity. Freakadelka. Equity? If you can get a pomo to define equity, you're doing better than I ever have. Ali Stuckey in a PragerU video nicely clarified the two. Biblical justice is getting what you deserve without favor. Social justice is getting what you don't deserve because you are favored. Justice demands that everyone be equal under the law. Social justice demands that everyone be equal, period. Economically, socially, and every other possible way. But lost in social justice is something that the Bible emphasizes. We are personally responsible. Gersh. Suffice it to say, social justice has, for millions of Pomo Christians, hijacked biblical notions of justice. So then, just what is justice? Right order, fitting judgment, fairness, right relationship, all brought to bear on unjust relations. But with even more biblical nuance, Christian justice is premised on the character of God. God, the Bible teaches, is a holy God. So justice, the Christian knows, is rooted in the character of God. And briefly, that character, God's character, is both holiness and love. Never holiness without love, never love without holiness. And the loving holiness of God spills out into judgment and mercy. In God there is an uncompromising fidelity to judgment coupled with a constant outpouring of mercy. But the biblical presentation of those couplets, holiness and love, judgment and mercy, as well as the Christian unpacking of those couplets across 2,000 years, have always understood that human agency is pivotal. And again, it's that notion of agency, responsibility, capacity to act, ability to choose. Agency is always centered in how holiness and love, or judgment and mercy, play out in human relations. Now, obviously, Western law unpacks its legal formations with agency in mind, right? I mean, if a man lies in wait to murder a woman, his sentence will be far greater because his agency played an enormous factor in the death of an innocent woman. Or if, with his car, let's say moving slower than the speed limit, if a man accidentally hits a kid on a wagon who, from out in front of a parked car, rolled out onto the street, justice rightly deems that his agency played far less a factor in the child's death. Agency. Through a Christian lens, justice says we don't judge based on a person's skin color or story, but on whether or not he committed the crime. Or, to put it differently, justice is concerned with truth, not life stories or skin color. Justice asks, did he do it? Yeah, he's guilty. Oh, he didn't do it? No, he's innocent. But it's agency that is denigrated, almost entirely obliterated by social justice. Social justice says that the car-driving man is a still greater culprit if his skin color was creamy or white than if his skin color was brown or black. Agency. And agency is just one of many factors that a Christian sense of justice would take into account. But let me take this to a different level. A level of what I think is thicker relevance to 21st century Christian disciples. Impartiality. And I note impartiality because A, it's under constant rhetorical attack by postmodernism as some kind of tool for oppression, and B, because it is a constant biblical theme. Postmodernism, cynical and deconstructing at its root, postmodernism says impartiality is impossible. But that assertion only makes the quest for impartiality, the ideal of impartiality, more impossible. I mean, shouldn't we want a judge to make as impartial a judgment as possible? Or isn't telling a judge that her decision is certifiably partial, isn't that a way to paralyze all her future judgments? Queso sagrado. That's exactly why pomos say impartiality is impossible. To paralyze all judicial judgments, to deconstruct the judicial system, to churn the legal system into a steaming pile of dog doo. To what end? So the pomos can, one day soon, be in charge of the judicial system.
But wouldn't that be the only fair way to resolve this dilemma? Put the pomos in power?
Exactamundo, power. Because as we all know, only the deconstructing pomos will make truly righteous judgments. Ooh. But let's get back to my point. The Bible celebrates impartiality. Proverbs 22 reads, "The rich and the poor have this in common. The Lord is maker of them all." Romans 2:11, "There is no partiality with God." 2 Chronicles 19:7, "Be very careful what you do, for the Lord our God will have no part in unrighteousness or partiality or the taking of a bribe." Deuteronomy 10:17, "For the Lord your God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords, the great, the mighty, and awesome God who does not show partiality nor take a bribe." Proverbs 29:13, "The poor and the oppressor have this in common: the Lord gives light to the eyes of both." Romans 10:12, "There is no distinction between Jew and Greek, for the same Lord is Lord of all, abounding in riches for all who call on him." And Jesus in Matthew 4:45 said, "The rain falls on the just and the unjust." In short, God does not count status in his evaluation of human souls. He does not pay attention to the status of birth order or skin color or sex or nationality or bank account. God's judgment is impartial. God's judgment is impartial and perfect. Justice itself. Holy, holy, holy. Oh goodness, my dear listener, that God does not pay attention to status when he judges is not even a tiny bit to say he will render the exact same judgment for us all. Again, that would be the kind of fallacious argument a pomo would make. God judges evil.
Well then, Ed, and I refuse to call you Dr. You. If God judges us all equally, then we will all either be saved or damned together as a group to the exact same extent. 'Cause God is concerned about equity when he makes a judgment, which wouldn't even be nice, 'cause judgments are never nice.
Well, sorry, my befuddled, chaos-inducing pomo interrupter. That God is impartial is not even to say that God renders the exact judgment for all persons. That'd be to ignore not only human agency, but justice itself. No, that God shows no partiality is to say he doesn't allow anyone's status to rise to their benefit. God judges each soul for the quality of soul that it is, for the moral weight of each action, for the quality of each thought. So we don't need to confuse the categories the way you do. True, pomos are right to say that without justice there can be no peace, and I don't know anyone who disagrees with that. But again, that only begs the definition. What is a just civilization? One that judges entire ethnic groups as guilty and evil or innocent and noble by virtue of their skin color?
No justice, no peace.
Amen, dude. But how would you define justice? Seriously, how would you define social justice?
As the redistribution of goods from the oppressors to the oppressed.
Okay, but who are the oppressed? Who determines that? And what provisions do you have in place to keep, as history so often repeats, what do you have in place to keep the oppressed from becoming oppressors?
That you would even ask such a hateful question proves you're an oppressor.
And so we've moved from a reasoned debate to an ad hominem argumentation. That's pretty much how it always goes. Instead, here's the logic of a Christian framing of justice. Justice is rooted in the character of God. Now, I'm not going to unpack an entire theology of God here, but again, I want to say that it's sufficient to note God is holy and true, and that God never changes. His character does not change. His character does not adapt just because the cultural climate shifts. God is one, not just one as to his being, Father, Son, and Spirit, if we get into that whole discussion, but he's singular as to his perfect integrity. He's infinitely dynamic. He can solve problems in ways we could never imagine, but his character doesn't change. He's as true and holy today as when he first spoke life into existence. And at the beginning, God spoke. He revealed his law. His law, to quote John Calvin, reveals his character. And as the eternal, immutable, holy God, he is both Lord and Judge. Lord, he owns it all. Judge, he both judges creation frequently here in time and space and will judge creation in the afterlife at a great judgment about which the Bible speaks, about which Jesus spoke repeatedly. And then, because he is love, we're not surprised to know that God wants what is best for his creation. So he wants justice for not only people and individuals, but for society, for how people live together, for how strangers navigate the actions and relationships and decisions that they, through each one's respective agency, work out together. How does God want all of that conducted? With justice, in ways that mirror his own integrity, purity, love, holiness, truth, mercy. And I'm going to say more about this in next episode, but there can be no mercy without justice. That point, there can be no mercy without justice, is entirely lost on our POMO culture. Pomos love mercy, they just have no abiding way to frame it since they don't believe in God and don't value holiness and don't view justice through any sense of transcendence. So, society then is an arena where God wants to, no, he commands justice. And the Bible? Yeah, you know what? Let me make the biblical point by telling you a story. On Sunday, September 12th, here in 2021, Bishop John Spong died. In case you didn't know, Bishop Spong is a famous, or depending on your perspective, an infamous man for having led the Episcopal Church into heretical territory. Now, that was a move which saw the Episcopal Church get repeatedly shredded into differing denominations, and which saw their numeric decline, the decline of the whole Episcopalian Church across Spong's lifetime, across his ministry, by more than 50%. That church declined by more than 50% during his time. And concerning heresy, Pastor Spong, spelled S-P-O-N-G, Spong argued that God is not a Trinity, that Jesus is not God, and the New Testament Gospels were not accurate in their portrayals of Christ. No, he said, Jesus was just a good and loving Jew. Just a few little things that are important to those who follow the risen Christ. That's just a sample of the doctrinal front with Spong. But concerning biblical Christian morality, Reverend Spong argued, taught, preached, published that the Bible was wrong about sexuality, that sex is not in fact reserved for marriage between a man and a woman, and that lesbians and homosexuals have the right both to be ordained in the Episcopalian Church and lead the church into loving ways as bishops. Man, there's just a few paltry items that are important to those who embrace a biblical, a Christian worldview. Wow. And through all of that, Bishop Spong, a pastor whom author David Virtue says beats the purple minister's apparel to death with every ounce of energy he has while getting paid handsomely for doing so, Spong helped to destroy the faith of millions of Christian believers. When asked 8 years ago by a journalist writing for a religious news service how he reflected on his career in his own mind, here's what Bishop Spong said, quote, "It was really a very exciting time. I was simply interpreting a rising consciousness," end quote. Now, that, my friends, is a grotesque mischaracterization of justice. Simply interpreting a rising consciousness? That's what every heretic ever has done. Heretics always just want to make Christ fit, air quotes, fit the times better. Or even worse, simply interpreting a rising consciousness is what every new genocidal tyrant said across the 20th century.
Relax, citizens. I'm just enacting the new and trendy moral consciousness. The Jews cause all our problems, so send them to Auschwitz. Yes, dear leader Stalin, the Ukrainians are a burden on our economy, so it does make sense to starve millions of them to death. That is the new consciousness at work.
Yeah, that'll square with a new rising consciousness. Guys, justice has to be rooted. Justice has to be defined and grounded. And you can't have a biblical worldview, you can't embrace a Christian worldview if that worldview simply accommodates itself to the zeitgeist, the mood of the times, each new year, right? I mean, today, abusing women is morally acceptable, so Christianity should square itself with that. And tomorrow, when asking questions is deemed hate speech, the church should warmly embrace that new rising consciousness. Or convenient abortion is fine now since it's acceptable per the zeitgeist of 21st century America? But tomorrow, a little forced euthanasia of the elderly or those who don't think the right things, that'll be acceptable then too, right? Because after all, culture changes and Christian ethics merely go along with the new rising consciousness. Holy God in heaven, the church needs simply to interpret the rising consciousness and go with the flow, and justice will be, oh God help us, we do that, and justice will be entirely flushed down the toilet. And I'm afraid that's what's happening now. You must get an injection in your body to hold a job? No thanks, Reverend Spong. Me? I'll stick with the holy character of God, even when that makes me uncomfortable. Holy, holy, holy Lord God Almighty, praise you, Abba, for your justice. Have mercy on America. Thank you so much, my listener, for thinking with me today. Please go and turn your beautiful, God-given brains on, everybody.